Hello, everyone. This is our study group, Spiritist Psychology, and I'd like to hand it over to Anaí. Over to you, Anaí.
Thank you, Fabricio. Hello, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about the ego-self axis. The name is strange for most of people, but we have already learned about the ego. We have had 2 classes, I think, about the self. One of them also with Professor Lionel Corbett. I think everybody can see who hasn't already seen. But so today, it's not, we don't want to make things complicated for people that are not used with the terms, but just for, purposes of information, okay? This concept of an ego-self axis was actually, I think, originally proposed by an analyst called Eric Newman, right, Lionel?
And
Neumann, thank you. If you can correct me, the accent sometimes, okay, because it's different in Portuguese, I appreciate. And okay, it was concerning childhood development, we could say. But here, for our purpose and understanding of psychological and spiritual development, I'm going to be using more one author that is called Edward Edinger, right? Who wrote about the ego axis, self-axis, okay? And also he wrote a wonderful paper called the ego-self paradox, okay? People can look for it if want to go further. But our focus here today, it's on the vital, so this vital connecting link between the ego and the self that ensures the integrity of the ego and also its functional autonomy, okay? And because in clinical observations, we can see that it leads us to the conclusion that the integrity and stability of the ego depend in all stages of development on a living connection with the self, okay? This according to, to Edinger and a lot of other authors. But I want you to consider that we are here in Spiritist psychology, we are considering the self also as the spirit, okay? And the ego as, let's say, a way of the spirit to be present when it reincarnates and to be active in this life, okay? Dealing and learning and doing the experience that the self, the spirit, according to Joana de Angelis, has proposed to do in this life, okay? So that's going to be our focus. And we are going to be talking more about this in the next meeting, that it's about individuation. We are going to see a little further, issues about the ego-self axis, but I wanted to just to give you a quick introduction. So according to Edinger, the ego cannot exist without the support of the self. And the self apparently needs the ego to realize it. So psychic development, and I would say also spiritual development, can be considered a continuous process of a dialectic between ego and self, leading paradoxically to both greater separation and greater intimacy, okay? So in a healthy process, the ego self-axis becomes conscious, let's say, okay? We are going to see all of that. You don't have to despair with all these concepts, but I wanted just to give an introduction today so that people realize that there is a connecting link between the ego and the self that is developmental, okay? So when we are developing here, our personality, let's say, and that the integrity and stability of the ego depend in all stages of development on a living connection with the self, capital S, as Lionel says, okay? So let's see what Joanna tells us about that. So in the book, Psychology of Gratitude, that has been translated to English, that's why I'm trying to use the books that have already been translated. So each human being is a specific cosmos whose origin is lost in the secluded regions of the infinite. Okay, this is Joanna saying. So transcendent, this localized cosmos, each one of us, reflects the experiences lived and accumulated in the deep personal unconscious of each individual, in the same way as they are registered in the collective unconscious. So she says that the collective shadow that results from the current academic preconception dominates society, and the resentment generates guilt and animosity, violence and frustration, fear and loneliness, which transforms citizens into ingrates when they should be converted into beacons of resplendent light in order to change the social and moral perspective of humanity. So here, when Joanna says the collective shadow, she's talking about the materialism, the excessive materialism that we are living in, okay? And this academic preconceptions about in science and in academy, that we are, you know, only a brain and a mind, and we are going to disappear when we die, and this and that. And she's saying that this dominates society and let's say, brings a resentment that generates guilt and animosity. So all the shadow that we are, you know, the collective shadow, the fear, violence, frustration, loneliness, okay? And that transforms citizens into ingrates when they should be converted. Look at how a beautiful image, into beacons of resplendent light in order to change the social and moral perspective of humanity. So Joanna says, let me just change the, here. The perspective of transcendence offers human beings an equally great meaning, because they do not end their evolutionary cycle when death happens, when we all have this concept of transcendence and that we are transcendent beings, okay? So their goals are transferred from the narrow circle of corporeal injunction to the cosmic amplitude extending indefinitely. Okay, so it's like an expansion of consciousness that when we have this perspective of transcendence about ourselves, and that we just leave this corporeal injunction to go towards the cosmic amplitude extending indefinitely, okay? So under this new perception, the transitory ego modifies its behavior due to the fascinating understanding of immortality and releases the self from its afflictive constraint. So ego-self axis, okay, the relationship between the two of them and this development of consciousness. This immortalist vision also produces psychological growth, endowing the individual with moral confidence and identification with life, through which one overcomes the existential crisis. Okay, so she's saying that the immortalist vision, it's very, very important for psychological growth. And it produces in the individual a moral confidence and an identification with life, through which one overcomes the existential crisis. Okay, so now we come to the fun part, and also the, let's say, the practical part of our talk. And it's just, it's like 40 pages if people want to read The Knight in Rusty Armor. It's very popular here in Brazil when we are talking about issues like that we are talking today. And to start, I would like you to pick each one of you to pick a number from 1 to 3, 1, 2, or 3, but try to choose one of these 3 numbers that appear in your mind without thinking, okay? Do it now. You don't have to tell me, just stay with you. Okay, 1, 2, or 3. Each one of you pick one number and just keep with you, okay? You are not going to have to tell anyone about that. So, so it's a tale, the Knight in Rusty Armor, that it's a great metaphor to our need to keep in touch with ourselves. Okay, so this ego self axis and this link, this connecting link between them, that is so vital. So let's go. So this is a light-hearted tale of a desperate knight. This is the introduction. You can get, like Lionel, your tea and relax, okay? In search of his true self. His journey reflects our own, filled with hope and despair, belief and disillusionment, laughter and tears. Anyone who has ever struggled with the meaning of life and love will discover profound wisdom and truth as this delightful fantasy unfolds. So the knight's dilemma. Once, a long time ago, in a land far away, there lived a knight who thought of himself as good, kind, and loving. He did all the things that good, kind, and loving knights do. He fought foes who were bad, mean, and hateful. He slew dragons and rescued damsels in distress. When the knight business was slow, he had the annoying habit of rescuing damsels, even if they did not want to be rescued. So, although many ladies were grateful to him, just as many were furious with him. This he accepted philosophically. After all, one can't please everybody. The knight was famous for his armor. It reflected such bright rays of light that villagers would swear they had seen the sun rise in the north or set in the east when the knight rode off to battle. As he rode off to battle frequently, at the mere mention of a crusade, the knight would eagerly don his shining armor, mount his horse, and ride off in any direction. So eager was he, in fact, that sometimes he would ride off in several directions at once, which was no easy feat. So these are some pictures of our knight. and riding in the sunset. So for years, this knight strove to be the #1 knight in all the kingdom. There was always another battle to be won, dragon to be slain, or damsel to be rescued. The knight had a faithful and somewhat tolerant wife, Juliet, who wrote beautiful poetry, said clever things, and had a penchant for wine. He also had a young golden-haired son, Christopher, who he hoped would grow to be a courageous knight. Juliet and Christopher saw little of the knight because when not fighting battles, slaying dragons, and rescuing damsels, he was occupied with trying on his armor and admiring its brilliance. As time went on, the knight became so enamored of his armor that he began wearing it to dinner and often to bed. After a time, he didn't bother to take it off at all. Gradually, his family forgot how he looked without it. So you can see the symbolism and the metaphors, okay? But we were going to talk about that a little later. So one day, Juliet confronted her husband. "I think you love your armor more than you love me." "That's not true," answered the knight. "Didn't I love you enough to rescue from the dragon and set you up in this classy castle with wall-to-wall stones?" "What you loved," said Juliet, peering through his visor so that she could see his eyes, "was the idea of rescuing me. You didn't really love me then, and you don't really love me now." "I do love you," insisted the knight, hugging her clumsily in his cold, stiff armor and nearly breaking her ribs. "Then take off that armor so that I can see who you really are," she demanded. "I can't take it off. I have to be ready to mount my horse and ride off in any direction," explained the knight. "If you don't take it off the armor, I'm taking Christopher, getting on my horse, and riding out of your life." Well, this was a real blow to the knight. He didn't want Juliet to leave. He loved his wife and his son and his classy castle, but he also loved his armor because it showed everyone who he was, a good, kind, and loving knight. Why didn't Juliet realize that he was any of these things? The knight was in turmoil. Finally, he came to a decision. Continuing to wear the armor wasn't worth losing Juliet and Christopher. Reluctantly, the knight reached up to remove his helmet, but it didn't budge. He pulled harder, it held fast. Dismayed, he tried lifting his visor, but alas, that was stuck too. Though he tugged on the visor again and again, nothing happened. The knight paced back and forth in great agitation. How could this have happened? Suddenly, the knight had an idea. Without saying where he was going, he hurried to the blacksmith's shop in the castle's courtyard. They tried to get his armor off, and they kept at it for many days without success. Each day, the knight grew more despondent, and Juliet grew colder. Finally, the knight had to admit that the smith's efforts were useless. The knight was sick at heart that his wife didn't seem to love him anymore. He also feared that if he didn't get his armor off soon, Juliet and Christopher would really leave. He had to get the armor off, but he didn't know how to do it. Pay attention to that. Unable to find aid in his own kingdom, the knight decided to search in other lands. Somewhere there must be someone who can help me get this armor off, he thought. So early one morning, he got onto his horse and he rode away. He didn't dare look back for fear he might change his mind. On his way out of the province, the knight stopped to say goodbye to the king. So here we have the symbolism of the king. Can talk about that later. Who had been very good to him. As the knight rode across the drawbridge and into the courtyard, he saw the court jester sitting cross-legged, playing a reed flute. The jester was called Gladbag because over his shoulder he carried a beautiful rainbow-colored bag filled with all sorts of things that made people laugh or smile. That's an image of a jester. So there is one, the Gladbag tells the knight, there is one who can help you, knight, to bring the real you into sight. You know someone who can get me out of this armor? Who is it? Merlin, the magician, you must see. Then you will discover how to be free. So now we all go into Merlin's woods. So in Merlin's woods, it was no easy task to find the wily wizard. There were many woods to search, but only one Merlin. So the poor knight rode on day after day, night after night, becoming weaker and weaker. As he rode through the woods alone, the knight realized there were many things he didn't know. He'd always thought of himself as very smart, but he didn't feel very smart at all trying to survive in the woods. Reluctantly, he admitted to himself that he didn't even know the poisonous berries from the edible ones. One morning, he woke up feeling weaker than usual and a little peculiar. That was the morning he found Merlin. The knight recognized the magician at once. He was sitting under a tree, clothed in a long white robe. Animals of the forest were gathered around him. The knight shook his head glumly. How could all these animals find Merlin so easily when it was so hard for him? We have here also the symbolism of the magician and of Merlin. I have, of course, some, it made it short, okay, for purposes of our class. So people who have read the book, of course, we are missing some characters, but we just didn't have much time. But you can go and read the book, that it's great. So a small image, some images of Merlin. Wearily, the knight climbed down from his horse. I've been looking for you, he said to the magician. I've been lost for months. All your life, corrected Merlin, biting off a piece of carrot and sharing it with the nearest rabbit. The knight stiffened. I didn't come all this way to be insulted. Perhaps you have always taken the truth to be an insult, said Merlin. The knight didn't much like this remark either, but he was too weak from hunger and thirst to climb back on his horse and ride away. Merlin looked at him compassionately. You were most fortunate, he commented. You were too weak to run. What does that mean? Snapped the knight. Merlin smiled in reply. A person cannot run and also learn. He must stay in one place for a while. I'm going to stay only long enough to learn how to get out of this armor, said the knight. When you learn that, you will never again have to climb on your horse and ride off in all directions, stated Merlin. Drink this, ordered Merlin. What is it? Asked the knight. Life, Merlin replied. Life? Yes, said the wise magician. Did it not first seem bitter? Then, as you tasted more of it, was it not pleasant? The knight nodded. Yes, and the last swallows were quite delicious. That was when you began to accept what you were drinking. One night, the knight asked a question long on his mind. Were you really the teacher of King Arthur? Yes, I taught Arthur. But how can you still be alive? Arthur lived eons ago, exclaimed the knight. Past, present, and future are all one when you are connected to the source, replied Merlin. What is the source? Asked the knight. It is the mysterious, invisible power that is the origin of all. You once said that I put on this armor because I was afraid. I wore it for protection when I went to battle. I had to prove that I was good, kind, and loving, and a loving knight. If you really were good, kind, and loving, why did you have to prove it? Merlin asked. So now we come to the path of truth. It is time for you to go. This was the path you followed to get into these woods. You can't go back that way, but it leads to dishonesty, greed, hatred, jealousy, fear, and ignorance. Are you saying that I am all those things? The knight asked indignantly. At times, you are some of those things, Mast admitted quietly. The magician then pointed to another path. That is the path of truth. It gets steeper as it approaches the summit of a mountain far in the distance. Your decision to take an unknown trail while encumbered with heavy armor takes courage. The magician took an exquisite golden key from his neck and gave it to the knight. This key will open the doors to 3 castles that will block your path. So now people pay attention to the number that it's in your head, okay? The first castle is named Silence. The second, Knowledge. And the third, Will and Daring. Once you enter them, you will find your way out only after you have learned what you are there to learn. There is a different battle to be fought on the path of truth. The fight will be learning to love yourself. So each one of you has picked one number. Okay, so this number that you picked corresponds to one castle. So we are practicing to talk with ourselves, capital S. So let's see what each one of us has to learn with the number that we have picked. I have picked mine already, so I'm with you. So number 1 is the Castle of Silence. Okay, so who picked number 1 has to pay a lot of attention what's going on in the Castle of Silence. Number 2, Castle of Knowledge. Number 3, Castle of Will and Daring. So the Castle of Silence. As the knight entered a huge anteroom, he saw only a fire blazing in an enormous stone fireplace on one wall and 3 rugs on the floor. He sat down on the rug nearest to the fire. The knight soon became aware of 2 things. First, there seemed to be no door leading out of the room to other parts of the castle. Second, there was an extraordinary, eerie silence in the castle. Suddenly, the knight was startled by the sound of a familiar voice behind him. "Hello, knight." The knight turned and was astonished to see the king approaching him from a far corner of the room. "King," he gasped, "I didn't even see you. What are you doing here? The same thing you are, knight, looking for the door. One can't really see until one understands, said the king. When you understand what's in this room, you'll be able to see the door to the next. I certainly hope so, king. I'm surprised to see you here. I heard you were on a crusade. That's the word I give whenever I travel the path of truth. It's easier for my subjects to understand. Everybody understands crusades, but very few understand truth. Yes, agreed the knight. I wouldn't be on this path myself if I weren't trapped in this armor. Most of us are trapped inside our armor, declared the king. We set up barriers to protect who we think we are. Then one day we get stuck behind the barriers and we can't get out. I never thought you as being stuck, king. You are so wise, said the knight. I have enough wisdom to know when I'm stuck and to return here so that I can learn more about myself. This is a new kind of crusade for you, dear knight, one that requires courage, more courage than all the other battles you've known before. It will be your greatest victory if you can summon the strength to stay and do what you need to do here. The knight sat still and listened to the silence. It occurred to him that for most of his life, he hadn't really listened to anyone or anything. His own pain and loneliness welled up in him. Soon he felt Juliet's pain and loneliness too. He burst into tears. I wonder why these rooms keep getting smaller. So each time he cried and had an insight, there appeared another door, and he went through and the rooms were smaller and smaller, okay? He asked himself aloud. A voice replied, because you are closing in on yourself. Startled, the knight looked around. He was alone, or so he had believed. Who had spoken? You did, said the voice in answer to his thought. The voice seemed to come from within himself. Could that be? So remember, we are practicing ego-self access, okay? This conversation. Yes, it could be, answered the voice. I am the real you. The knight was doubtful. If you're the real me, then pray tell, who am I? The voice replied kindly, you can't expect to learn everything at once. Why don't you get some sleep? When the night opened, so the night goes to sleep, when the night opened his eyes, he looked around in amazement. He was lying on the path of truth, just the other side of the castle of silence. The knight reached up to scratch his head, and it took him a moment to realize that he was scratching his own skin. His helmet had fallen away. So just to make it a little clear, this happened when he started crying and realized he had not really paid attention to Juliet and Christopher Payne, and he didn't know himself. Okay, Merlin, I must talk to you. To answer your question, you were in the Castle of Silence for a very long time because the word was really long. Merlin never failed to astound the knight. How could you know I wanted to ask you that? Since I know myself, I can know you. We are all part of each other. The knight thought for a moment. I'm beginning to understand. I could feel Juliet's pain because I'm part of her. Yes, Merlin answered. That is why you could cry for her as well as for yourself. That was the first time you shed tears for another. You were born with a heart, and now you are using it. just as you were meant to do. So now the castle of knowledge, who picked number 2, that's your castle, okay? So the castle of knowledge. The castle of knowledge was larger than the castle of silence, and its door was solid gold. This was the largest castle the knight had ever seen, even larger than what the king had built for himself. The knight started at the impressive structure and wondered who had designed it. The voice said, the castle of knowledge was designed by the universe itself, the source of all knowledge. Inside, the darkness was so dense that the knight couldn't see his own hand. On a wall, he was able to read, knowledge is the light by which you shall find your way. He approached another wall and who could read a little bit more. Have you mistaken need for love? And then he thought, I suppose I have to figure out the answer before I get more light to see the door. So as the knight realized how unfairly he'd used Juliet, tears flowed down his face. Yes, he had needed her more than he loved her. He wished he could have loved her more and needed her less, but he didn't know how. As he continued to cry, it dawned on the knight that he needed Christopher too, more than he'd loved him. A knight needed a son to go out and to battle in his father's name when the father grew old. Remember, we were talking about parents' complexes last meeting. This didn't mean the knight didn't love Christopher, for he loved his son's golden hair beauty. He also liked to hear Christopher say, I love you, Dad. But as he'd loved these things about Christopher, they had answered a need in him as well. A thought came to the knight in a blinding flash. He needed the love of Juliet and Christopher because he didn't love himself. In fact, he had needed the love of all the damsels he'd rescued from dragons and all the people for whom he'd fought in crusades because he didn't love himself. The knight cried harder as he realized that if he didn't love himself, he couldn't really love others. His need for them would get in the way. As he admitted this, a beautiful bright light shone around the knight, where there once had been darkness. A gentle hand touched his shoulder. Looking up through his tears, he saw Merlin smiling down. You have discovered a great truth. You can love others only to the extent that you love yourself. We have heard some guy, right, telling this to us 2,000 years ago, right? Yes, we don't learn. That's amazing. So there is nothing more beautiful than the light of self-knowledge. The knight found himself on the path of truth again. Alongside the path was a sparkling brook. He knelt to drink from it and noticed with some surprise that the armor on his arms and legs had rusted and fallen away. With all his armor gone except for the breastplate, the knight felt lighter and younger than he had in years. He also discovered that he liked himself better. With the firm steps of a young man, he started out for the castle of will and daring. So people who chose number 3, that's next castle is yours. Wow. So what's going on in the castle of will and daring? The castle of will and daring was taller than the others and its walls looked thicker. The door to the castle flew open and out lumbered a huge, menacing, fire-breathing dragon. Shocked, the knight stopped dead in his tracks. He'd seen some dragons in his time, but this one beat them all. The knight stalled for time. "What are you doing in the castle of Will and Daring?" he asked the dragon. "Can you think of a better place for me to live? I'm the dragon of fear and doubt. I'm here to knock off all your smart Alex who think you can lick anybody just because you've been through the castle of knowledge." The knight remembered that once Merlin said that self-knowledge can kill the dragon of fear and doubt. How can you live with yourself if you don't have the will and daring to test your self-knowledge? Self-knowledge is truth, and truth is mightier than the sword. The knight remembered that he was born good, kind, and loving. Aren't we all? Therefore, he didn't have to feel fear and doubt. The dragon was only an illusion. The dragon threw gigantic, crackling flames at the knight, time and time again. But try as hard as the monster might, it could not set fire to him. As the knight continued to approach, the dragon became smaller and smaller until it was finally no bigger than a frog. Its flame extinguished, the dragon began to spit small seeds at the knight. But these seeds, the seeds of doubt, didn't stop the knight either. The dragon became smaller as the knight continued to advance determinedly. The dragon could barely speak. Perhaps this time you've won, but I'll be back again and again to stand in your way. Come back whenever you want. Each time you do, I'll be stronger and you'll be weaker. So, the summit of truth, we are near the end. While climbing the mountain, after going through the last castle, the knight saw a huge boulder with an inscription. Though this universe I own, I possess not a thing, for I cannot know the unknown if to the known I cling. When the knight let go of the rock he was clutching, he suddenly knew the full meaning of the inscription. He'd let go of all that he'd feared and all he had known and possessed. His willingness to embrace the unknown had set him free. Now the universe was his to experience and enjoy. The knight found himself on the mountaintop. He grew dizzy from the enchantment of seeing, hearing, and feeling the universe all around him. He had a numinous experience, right, Lana? His heart brimmed with love for himself, for Juliet and Christopher, for Merlin, for life, and for the entire wondrous world. Tears of gratitude flew from his eyes and melted the last of his armor. A radiant new light now shone from him, a light far brighter and more beautiful than his armor. He was one with the universe. He was love. So the last pictures, I hope you have enjoyed. You don't have to tell us, share with us your castle. Let me just finish here and stop sharing with you. And now we have time for some, questions. At last meeting, we had a lot of people making questions. And one of the things that maybe some people that wanted to make some comments and questions weren't able to, Fabricio and I forgot to tell in the beginning of the meeting. So for next meeting, but we thought that maybe during the, when I'm presenting the PowerPoint, maybe you could write down in the chat the questions so that Fabricio can, after the PowerPoint presentation, Fabricio can go and read the questions. I think maybe this will make it more, quick so that everyone can talk. And let's see what you think about. But today we haven't said in the beginning, right, Fabricio? So I think maybe we should start with Lionel, if you want to make comments and talk about a little of the symbolism of Merlin and the king. I know you like that.
Well, it seemed to me that the armor was his persona, which made him look good and protected him, but he couldn't take it off. He was so identified with him, with this persona, with how he looked, that it interfered with his relationship with his wife and his son. So he had to go on a long journey to find Merlin, who's kind of a self or a wise old man figure. Can we begin there?
Yeah, I think we should. And I know that Sylvia has read the book. I don't know if it was a surprise for, the idea was to surprise as many people as we could. Do you want to comment anything, Sylvia?
I was still surprised, actually, because it's always a new discovery when you read something again. And, my ideas were different when I read it. So now reading in conjunction the things I've been reading, preparing for this class, means a lot of things. And I have this tendency to learn by association with other things I read. So within this, you have the persona, this defense, the armor, but also remind me there is a poem by Fernando Pessoa, Tabacaria, that he talks about the mask, that he uses the mask for so long that when he tried to take out, it was stuck to his face. And then there is, things from King Lear. Who is it who can tell me who I am? When he asked himself, he was so lost. And then there's a lot of Sufi knowledge within this. So it's such an incredible little story, but there is so much to meditate and think about and really talk to oneself, because although, the three castles, you couldn't go for knowledge unless you talk to yourself first. And then you couldn't go to the next one to fight the dragon without knowing about yourself. So in a way, they are interconnected. And I think it feels, going from what Lionel had said, is almost the layers that of protection that we put self. We give this, oh yes, I'm happy, I know things, my life is okay. But then when we come back home, sometimes we sit and we think, am I really that person? Why do I pretend? Why don't I go out and say to people, sometimes I'm not very happy. That kind of thing, the conversations we have with ourselves. So it was a beautiful story. And I think I have a lot to meditate on that myself. So thank you for bringing it.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think Ju she has raised her hand.
Yes, hi everyone. What impacts me tremendously on this book is not that much the three castles that he has to go through, but the moment of the awakening. When he realizes that he cannot go the way he is, behaving himself, and that the willingness to depart on this great journey and stay on course, trying to find ways to better himself. So I think the awakening per se is it's absolutely fantastic in terms. Yeah, I understand that it being a reader, of course, we get so intrigued by the hurdles he has to face along the way. But I think the greatest one was actually be capable and having the courage to acknowledge where he was and what that he has to do something to change himself.
Thank you, June. Lionel, want to say something about the awakening?
Well, he didn't meet the wise old man until he was completely exhausted in the forest, until he was almost dead of hunger. And very often when you have that kind of narcissistic preoccupation with yourself, you won't let go of your armor until you're completely wiped out and you have no choice. And then it happens with grace.
Yeah, exactly. There are some animals in the forest that help him, like psychopomps, guides to the soul, guiding the soul in this awakening that Jussara is talking about. And that's a very important point that Lionel is bringing to us, because it's only when the ego is exhausted, right? Dying of hunger and thirst, and very tired and lost, like in a crisis, that there is this this movement to an awakening. And maybe we can think of all this crisis that we are going through in our days with the pandemic and all this fears of wars and or of these conflicts and the stuff that social media taking us in a sense together as in here, but also apart. People having difficulty many times to, to approach others, and to this empathy that developed and this compassion towards Juliet and Christopher's needs, and the learning of love also, to love oneself, to be able to love others, this awakening, I think spiritual awakening. And there's also one thing that only in the Castle of Silence, when we develop this ability, so it's so important. We see the research and things that meditation, nowadays meditation is so important, right? This inner silence, when he is in the Castle of Silence, that he hears a voice. So Jung talks about the voice, right, Lionel?
Mm-hmm. When you can only really meet the self if the ego is in silence. It has to be silent. Yeah, then you can hear it, but not otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's always worries me. That, for instance, today I was walking by the beach. I'm here in a beach. So by the seashore. And I will share with you, because I think here in Brazil, it's very common. In other parts of the world, maybe not so common, but it's winter time. But today it was very warm, like 26 degrees centigrade. People were in the ocean and things like that. It's global warming and all of this. So I was walking by the beach, and so I was, trying to think, and suddenly there was a sound. And okay, here in my state, in the very south of Brazil, there are no mountains by the seashore. It's a huge coastline. You can actually walk probably all the way to Argentina, I think, and Uruguay. Okay, we are in the border. So it's a coastline. It's kind of boring for other parts of Brazil, lots of mountains like in Rio de Janeiro and all this stuff. And so I was walking, okay, only seagulls and this and that. And what happened? A huge sound like tum, 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 tum. So what's that? Because to listen to that by the seashore, okay, I was listening to gulls and the waves and all this stuff. You can't imagine, as I grew near, it was somebody with a sound, okay, by the seashore, some young people or whatever, but so intense, so loud that I could hear many, I think 2 kilometers or more, okay? So just imagine if this noise is all around and people don't respect, you know, the privacy, the needs of other people, how can we, to say nothing about social media, people talking all the time and giving, you know, and what people talk all the time, whatever, arguing about this and that. So this inner silence, we are talking about ego access, ego self-access. So we can't, as like Lionel says, we can't hear and we can't be in contact with the self if we don't develop inner silence. And of course, external silence that calls the ego to the outside world all the time, it's going to make it very harder, much harder to us to develop this inner silence. I think Bianca wants to raise, yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for all what you are sharing with us. It's very important for us. And what I want to say is that the story we can compare also with our trajectory we have to do in a spiritual life, like a spirit. We are passing a lot of phases during our reincarnations. So we have to get to the awakened spirituality one time in one life, and there we can be with the because we are coming with family with the people that we already live in other lives. So the family is not always the same, but it always come some family with us, you know. So you can see them also like that, you know, our trajectory, spiritual trajectory.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's very important to think in the spirit, right? Evolving. Does anybody want to comment on that, Kai?
Yes, and talking about evolution, right? I was thinking about fear and doubt, right? And how they are illusions when we face them, right? And every time that we become a little more stronger and maybe be more wise in seeing what is really real, fear and illusions disappear or reduce in intensity. So I think it's an exercise, right, of seeing, becoming more aware, like Sylvia said, and being more maybe confrontational with the fear that comes with the changes that are necessary, like Bianca said, right? Without change in our evolution, without change, we get stuck, right? In the castle, right?
There is something that I didn't understand. I understand the second castle because of the need for self-knowledge, but I didn't understand why the third castle, where he's finally free, is will and desire. Because it seems to me that what is really required at the end of the journey is surrender, not will and more desire. I didn't understand that.
Will and daring.
Oh, daring.
Daring, yeah.
A big problem. Will, but don't you have to surrender that? And I don't understand why that's the final castle.
But don't you think that?
Sorry.
Think that when you surround, that's when you are daring? What I'm saying is, sometimes you have to have the courage to walk. And that's when you open yourself to the new. That's our way of saying, okay, now life is taking me to where I need to go. Maybe they walk together.
Is it about perhaps not just knowing, but also applying what you know? And maybe that's where the third castle came along. Because if you just do know, and then if you don't apply, is that setting yourself free? Hence, maybe that's why the need of the third castle.
That's an idea. Sylvia, I think Andrea, have you raised your hand? Yeah?
Lionel, is anybody spared from the armor? I think the armor is part of the journey, isn't it really? Isn't it part of us to evolutionize and experience the soul? And I think it's part of kind of like, walking into the forest, like, I don't know, like Hansel and Gretel. I don't know, this is how I feel. And I think the last one is absolutely poignant. And I actually picked number 3, I've been very honest. And when number 3 came up, and I was actually not surprised because I feel myself right in the situation right now, this moment. And I compare it to the 5 steps of grief. So when somebody loses somebody and the 5 steps of grief, and the last one is acceptance. But just before that, it's deep depression of something unbelievable experience. But yet, one of the most vital steps in grief. Without it, one wouldn't have learned. Because it was the hardest I ever went through, but my God, the most enlightened, and I wouldn't change a millisecond. And now coming out of it and going through the 3 stages of the castle, I'm in my 3rd. And even after, I thought, my God, maybe my armor is gone. Part of my armor was gone, yes, through grief. Life has changed, but there were still 3. And I'm actually in the 3rd one. So my real question is any one of us ever spared an armor?
But you only need the armor in certain situations. I mean, if you need it at work to protect yourself, you have to take it off when you come home to be with your children. The armor is only appropriate in certain situations, not if you identify it, then you can never take it off. That's the problem that this knight had. He was identified with his persona, so he couldn't let go of
it. I feel strongly that our armor is created by us, maybe as children, through fear and protection from our parents. Yeah. And it becomes stronger and stronger, and we are very fearful being without it. And I think it's the inner child which keeps it on our face and on our hearts and covering our very, very vulnerable part, a little bit like a turtle. So we are learning through life, through trust, but through trial and error to hopefully let go of the armor through time. And if you do not, then something very detrimental and something very big, something very traumatic will happen to us. We always get a chance to drop it. And I think the thicker the armor, desto more tougher the experience to drop it. Back to Lionel.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm still concerned about this business of will. That's the final stage. Can anyone help me with that?
Before passing to Sylvia, Lionel, I think what the will and daring, that the castle of will and daring, and also connecting what the Fabrizio and Andres brought, was that about the heart. Okay, the last sentence, he was love. Okay, So he was silent and he could talk better and identify himself and the knowledge within him. He realized, as Fabrício said, and also as Jussara said, the awakening in the end. But to get there, he had to find himself first and understand that he was already good, loving, and kind. He didn't have to pretend, put an armor to be loved by others, because he had the need that others liked him, loved him. So that's why he put the armor. But when he found this inside of himself, right, then he didn't need the armor anymore, and he could love, understand others, have empathy, compassion, because he found that within himself. But as I understand the last castle, it's more or less like Andreas said. See, Andreas, if I'm correct, what you said, that, okay, you realize you have this inside of yourself, and also as Fabrício said, but you have to dare to live, right? Not to live in life, so this can be present in your life. And without the armor, so without protecting yourself, be what you really are. So this, for this, you have to, to dare, and like Kai said, to face your fears and to face, the illusions of the ego that you are going to not to be loved and nobody will like you and this and that. So you have to dare, and you have to find the will within yourself to really be this presence. So that's why I thought the dragon that was menacing and, all this fire could kill him. He was afraid he would kill, but no, it was an illusion. So the fire didn't burn, right? It was a transformation when you see that it's all an illusion of the ego. Does it make sense to you? It's just, I don't know, Sylvia wants to say something.
Yes, there's so many things, isn't it? I just think the third castle means that even though we have self-knowledge, it doesn't mean that all our battles have ended. We are in a journey of self-discovery, and we can maybe go deeper and find it. But I think one of the things that I found interesting in the third castle, I don't know what you think about that, Lionel, is that it was terrifying to begin with, but as he faced it, it became smaller, wouldn't burn, and eventually it became really, like a frog that would spit seeds, and said to him, I know you're there, but I can always come back to tempt you, to provoke you. And I think in the question, if there was a point of uncertainty, whatever happened in his life, that dragon could come back. And I thought it was just as strong as he was in facing it, meant that the dragon was smaller. But, it was said to him, I'll be around looking, and if you weaken, I'll be put doubts into your mind again. So I think it's part of the struggle, because there is so much more. The universe is so infinite, and we as spirit are eternal and infinite. There's so much to learn. And I think that's what it means, is a part of the journey, that at certain points we'll be afraid again, or we'll be unsure, and doubt will come. I think it's part of the learning and the growth, spiritual enlightenment. I don't know, that's how I see it.
I thought the dragon might represent his mother complex, actually. And then when he confronts it, it gets smaller. But it's pretty terrifying. And that he had to put the armor on to protect himself from the mother complex. That was just my fantasy.
It depends
Another
on,
part, sorry.
depends from where our fears come, right? So,
Yes, we all have a little dragon, so, you know, different ones. But I thought as well that was interesting that he, you know, the way he was able to see the thing that when he realized that he needed people more than he loved them. I think it is so much part of our, you know, it's so, we oh, I love you, but no, I want to, she's mine, he's mine. And if the person wants somebody else, you get jealous. And I think this question of really learn how to love, how to give, is much more important than having. So I think it's all part of the journey that eventually we become spirits of light, you know. And I think that question in the Spirit's book, when Kardec asked the spirits, will everyone be enlightened? And then he said, this is your destiny. And this is part of our journey, part of our battle, which is wonderful, I think.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think
is the third not about conquering your fears? I'm talking about,
yeah.
I'm talking the first time I get a very strong feeling about male domination right now. I never had this in my life, so I have to be honest to say. So I'm more feminine than you can imagine. So, but I feel very masculine today. I have no idea why, having heard the story. And it's about facing your fears, and the dragon is your fears, and the armor is there to protect you, so your fears aren't practiced. And this is very, very much a mother complex, absolutely. Like Lionel said.
The king is also, right, Lionel, represents the masculine principle also, an archetype, that it's also a symbol of the fertilizing presence that creates new psychic life. One of the meanings. But I know that Tanya wants to talk, and I think Jussara, if we have time, but I just wanted to, there's one sentence that I have put, well, lots of sentences that I haven't put, but this I think maybe I can show Lionel what the author was talking, the voice in the Castle of Will and Daring, the voice talks to the knight, and because the knight is really afraid, okay, and the voice says, God gave man courage gives God to man. And then he says, look, if you face the dragon, there's a chance that it will destroy you. But if you don't face the dragon, it will surely destroy you. So that's a sentence just to make, you know, just for us to think a little more. A lot of metaphors. I think Tanya wants to talk, right, Fabrizio? And if we have time for Jussara again, get it?
Mm-hmm.
Tanya?
Hi, thank you. So I just was in my mind's eye, I was trying to go back in the story to where he made the leap from the insight. I think it was in Castle 2 that it was more his desire to be needed than actual love for his wife, that he was fulfilling his needs through her. And the insight that in order to be able to truly love, that he needed to be able to love himself, to give, you know, you can't give what you don't have. That was in Castle 2, I think, wasn't it? And then was it in Castle 3 that he certainly had, or no, it's at the end of Castle 3 when he comes through Castle 3 that he has the numinous experience and he feels this great love for himself, his wife, and his child. And so to me, I was kind of going back, but hold on, there must be many more steps before he reaches that summit. And then I'm sort of thinking, okay, you know, it's a dragon, it's a metaphor, it could be multiple fears and doubts that he needs to face down within himself, and you know, they'll kind of be layered. The toughest ones probably won't come up first, whatever it is. But it's sort of, I felt like maybe did I miss something in that because it just seemed such a leap from insight to feeling through this one sort of facing down, which I you know, obviously it's a metaphor. We don't face a dragon in the morning. But I was just wondering if I'd missed anything in that, or is it sort of just that multiple facing down of fears and developing the commensurate strengths, whatever that may need to replace those?
Both, Tanya, because there are lots of dialogues, okay? So I try to summarize for you guys so that we could see in one class, but in one meeting. But I strongly, well, I think it would be great if you could read the book, okay? Because the dialogues, I think you got, it's both things. He's wondering a lot of things. There are two characters, a squirrel and a pigeon that are psychopomps, and there are lots of dialogues. So there are lots of prizes and wonderings, and lots of fears also. But I try to summon up the main parts. But I think it's you're wondering because it's just like. It got shorter, and he jumped from one castle to other, but the dialogues are deeper, okay? So that's maybe you are wondering. So the dragon, of course, is his whole crisis is not only because he realized how little he had really loved his wife and son, and how little he loved himself. He was in doubt and fear of not being a lovable person. Okay, this is the main, like the axis and the main problem. But there are lots of other fears and doubts. But I strongly advise you to read so that it will make more sense to everybody. And you can make, like Sylvia said, your own connections. Because a lot of things that we relate and that we think, it's a really good practice to talk with our inner world. But I think you got the point. It's just because I had to make it shorter so we could see in a class, okay? But it's go deeper and read the book, because then you can, in your castle, you can see all he had been through, and you can think about, as Andreas did, well, I'm in this castle now, this is what I'm living, or this is what I should be. For instance, for the first time that I did, I will share with you, like Andreas did, my castle is always number one because I have to be in silence. I have a nose that I have such a difficult time to quiet my mind because of the extroverted feeling function. So that's why I was walking by the beach trying to meditate, and the sound just came to me. Maybe I could have closed my ears to the sound, but it was almost impossible. So each one of us has to go through this inner journey to see what are we missing in this conversation and in this link between the ego and the self, in this connection. How can I listen to my inner voice? And what's going on with my ego if it's too anxious, for instance, that I cannot meditate, or whatever. I'm so worried with this and that I cannot calm down and listen to myself. And if I listen to myself, what am I going to find, right? Which kind of doubts and fears? And how do I understand that they are, in a sense, it's a paradox, an illusion in terms of the self, we could say maybe, but it's very real for the ego, and it's a journey that we have to do to balance the two things, the experience of the ego in this material world, right? And also to help it be more mature, more strong, to be able to listen to ourselves. And let's remember what Joanna de Angelis is saying in the beginning of the, to expand our consciousness, to understand. And I thought it was a synchronicity, because she talks about the cosmic consciousness, right? To get to this part where we, and in the book, I hadn't realized first time I read that it talks, well, now he's one with the universe in a numinous experience, that Lionel will be talking to us about numinous experiences. So now he understood he was one with the universe. So to get to this point, of course, we have to go through this journey of self-knowledge. So do we have time for Jusada?
Anahi, just very quickly, there is a poem by Caleb, which is a Sufi poet. He talks, go to the edge, he said. And he said, no, I'm afraid, I can't go. Probably you all know this. And then he repeats, I said, I'm afraid. And then he said, eventually he goes, and then he can fly. And I think this is exactly that, because we're afraid, but once we go, we know that we have the wings to fly. But until we get the courage to get to the edge, I thought it would go really well with this. Yeah,
a beautiful image.
Yeah.
We started late. Do we have time for Jusada, Fabricio?
Jusada mentioned here on the chat that she doesn't need to talk anymore.
Okay. So are we all okay?
Yes.
Okay, so next meeting, we're going to be talking a little bit more about ego axis, ego self-axis, and we are going to talk about individuation. And there is a very interesting movie that is called, I love movies, you know that, so I'm always suggesting to people, but it's one of the movies that they say you cannot miss, one of the 100 movies you cannot miss watching before you die. So let's try. If people want, I usually put, when I talk about individuation, I put some images up the, I think it's a great example. And the name is Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. Have you seen Groundhog Day?
Yeah,
so I will use,
movie.
have you seen Lionel?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just sometimes I put some, I give the character as an example of individuation process and everything that he goes through. So we're going to be talking about that next meeting. Thank you so much for being here, and Fabricio.
And the thing, the castles, they remind me of the schools in Hogwarts. In the Harry Potter saga, the different schools, the different personality that goes into each different schools remind me of these castles as well.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you
and
all.
see
Thank
you
you,
next
Lionel.
time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.